From the Iraq-Afghanistan war to being named one of Golf Digest's best golf teachers in America. Joe Steadman, he's up next on Paradise in the Pines. Welcome to Paradise in the Pines, a podcast about the people, places, and stories that make this the home of American golf. Brought to you by the Pinehurst, Southern Pines, Aberdeen Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. Welcome back to Paradise in the Pines, everybody. We're joined today by Joe Steadman. He is the Director of Instruction at the Country Club of North Carolina. Joe, welcome to Paradise in the Pines.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here.
38-year-old guy from upstate New York, recently named one of Golf Digest's best golf teachers in America. How does that sound?
Yeah, it's still getting used to that, but we were excited about it. It was a nice award. So, how
do you get considered for that? Out of all the people, and keep in mind, I looked at the list of people that you're joining the company with, and when if you listen to Sirius XM PGA Tour Radio, Michael Breed is on that list. Greg Ducharme, who's with Michael on that show, is on that list. A number of other people that are very recognizable names. Your name is on that list. How did you get considered for such an honor?
To be honest, just bribery is right. Usually no. I think you get nominated. So somebody has to nominate you for that.
Yeah.
And then there's a fairly extensive application you fill out. So you basically fill out your background, qualifications. They have a series of questions that they ask of how you teach, what technology you use, like blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And you basically submit that, and they review it, and it's nice, but it's also like you think of all the other people out there that are doing the same thing you are, and so many good people out there that are just making people better that you've never heard of. So it's nice to get that, but I just at the same time I've been trying to just keep doing what I'm doing, and because it's a title, which is great, but it's like at the end of the day, if you're making people better and you're helping people out, that's what it's all about. It's but yeah.
So from Plattsburgh, New York, where you probably don't get to play a whole lot. You got maybe 3 months to play golf up there. How did you first fall in love with the game?
Yeah, to be honest, it's kind of strange because there's not a whole lot of golf opportunity up there from the weather, and just economically, it's the golf that's there is the bare minimum. A lot of the courses up there, I don't know how they stay above water, to be honest. It's tough. So there was the air base there, Plattsburgh Air Force Base, that shut down in the mid-90s. They had like a little 9-hole golf course. And so I started out, my dad would take me there when I was a kid, and occasionally, and learned a lot of my first cuss words from him there.
It's easy on the golf course. You hear quite a few.
Just kind of got into it as something to do. I was a hockey player, so hockey was everything. But golf was just something you did in the off season. But got really into it when I was young, probably 7, 8 years old. I really got the bug. I started buying, $2 play it again sports clubs, like with my lawn mowing money, as I was grown up and getting older. But I think I started around like 7, 8, and then I really kind of got the bug in middle school. But that was like my home course, my first job. I worked there, got paid. Doug, Dave, and Dolores, Vivian. Dave has since passed away, but really great people. They're great mentors. Kind of taught me the basics of, maintenance, and kind of really got into that aspect of it and interested in that. And then, so that was like the root. I played in high school, but I wasn't. It was, like I said, it was something I just enjoyed doing. It was fun to do, but I wasn't. I was shooting. 40, like in the 9
That's
holes.
Not bad for somebody taking up the game.
Yeah, but there was a lot of other good players there, so I wasn't terribly competitive with it in high school. But that was definitely the genesis of the golf bug.
It's funny how we all kind of remember that first start with the game of golf. I remember playing on a little military, Little Creek amphibious base in Norfolk, Virginia, a little dirt track, but that's where I learned to play the game. You got to learn to hit the ball and strike it well. So you're in school, you're in high school. I think we all remember where we were on 9/11. You were 16 years old. You saw that. It impacted thousands, tens of thousands of guys at that time. How did it impact you and lead you on a trajectory that led you to Special Forces?
Yeah. So to be honest, I was in 10th grade biology class, and obviously the school year had just started, so we were still, like, I was playing soccer at the time. Hockey season hadn't even started yet, so we just, like, I remember just walking down the hallway, and everything was like normal, like a normal day, and then all of a sudden you saw like people crying, and like there was like a buzz, and I was like, what the hell, what's going on? And got into my biology class, and biology wasn't my favorite thing, so I wasn't necessarily focused all the time there. But I said to the teacher, I was like, hey, we might want to turn the TV on. She was like, Joe, we're not turning the TV on, sit down. And I was like, no, I think we should turn the TV on. I go and turn the TV on. She's like, oh my God, like there's, so everything. And so I remember with the whole class, we just sat there and watched everything unfold. I think it was at the North Tower, was the second tower. I watched that live. We watched that live go down. And of course the aftermath. So I think initially it was just anger, confusion, at the time, understood, terror, like the concept of terrorism, but I didn't understand, the
world ramifications.
Yeah. And the geopolitical stuff going on. And, I was just angry. And, that definitely kind of led me. I was, actually trying to go to Berkeley School of Music. I was big into music. Yeah, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up, but so I wanted to go to music school, and that kind of changed the whole trajectory. The military started becoming more and more appealing, and then of course, when you started seeing it all, unfold, and us actually becoming active and doing things, that it kind of became clear. I always tell people, for whatever reason, I don't know how I know, but instincts have always been always served me fairly well. Yeah. I don't know how I know, I just know. And usually it works out. And that was just a completely instinctual thing. Hey, this is right.
Yeah.
Go do this.
I think thousands of guys felt that same way.
Yeah.
Or something similar. We won't go deep into your experience, but you did 3 tours, I understand, in Iraq and Afghanistan. So first of all, thank you for your service.
You. Yeah.
I appreciate everything, and we all appreciate that. How did you still maintain your connection with the game of golf, even though you were over in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I didn't really initially. I was 1,000%, engaged in it, and it's still awkward. One of the things people ask me about the most, how did you go from that to this?
Yeah.
And again, there's a lot of answers to that question, but I always say, if you would have told the 25 or 26-year-old version of me that in just a few short years I wasn't going to be doing what I was doing, I would have thought you were nuts. And then if you would have told me that I would have been a golf professional, I would have laughed you out of the room.
Yeah.
It just wasn't even
didn't compute.
No, it wasn't even golf was
yeah,
not even in the realm of things I was concerned about at the time. So it really, during that period, golf was I think I played a few times when we were back from trips or whatever, at the MWR course there in Germany. But it was hey, what are you guys doing this weekend? Oh, there's a golf course up there. Oh yeah, I used to play golf. Let's go. It was great. We had a great time, but that was about the extent of it. And it wasn't really till I got back here at, Fort Bragg, or I guess it's Fort Liberty now, but as an instructor, where I actually had time to be oh, wow, well, you have all these golf courses that are right around here. And I'm not going anywhere. You're when you're an instructor, you're there for 2-3 years. And there's no deployments.
We're talking about an instructor in the Army.
In the military, yeah, correct. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Before the golf, yeah.
This was when, again, golf was not even on the scope of things. I was fully expecting to do a, full career in the military. I loved it. I loved almost every second of it. Almost. But yeah, so that was kind of I started playing more when I was back here. No deployments, no, going here and there. It was like, hey, you're going to be here for 3 years or whatever. So it was like, it was before I had kids. So it was like, it was there. And you like, man, you got Pinehurst, you had, I played a lot at Legacy, Southern Pines, Talmore, we would do the Golf Now, sweep.
Sure.
I had some buddies up north of base, so we'd play at Anderson Creek quite a bit. I was a member at Bayonet. That was right. We lived in Rayford at the time, so it was like you had all these places to play, and you had all these different people. It got to the point where we were just at work, being like, like, hey man, it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. Where are we? Yeah, where are we going? Where are we going this weekend? And start talking smack to each other and everything. So, and then it just kind of. Yeah, it just kind of ballooned. I started getting better at it, and
when it became a career thought,
that probably wasn't closer to like 2015. There were multiple things that kind of led me to the exit of the military. Probably the most significant was too significant was we had kids. That really changed my perspective of things, and then. Just physically, like that, even being like a young, healthy guy, like, you get beat up doing that in that world. And, I was very thankful not to have any serious, injuries like a lot of guys did, but, just started having back issues, started having neck issues, started having shoulder, all the little places that you just, over the years, you're like, I'm not going to go get it taken care of because I don't want to miss the next thing. That's our worst problem. Really, one of our worst problems is we don't really take care of ourselves because we're constantly going and going, and you don't want to miss something that the team's going to do or so we don't really address it until later in your career, later in life. And by then it's like manifested and it's, exponential. So I definitely started getting that. And there was a few other things. I was just like, you know what, this is a good time. Like again, the same instinct that brought me in. I always tell people probably two of the best decisions I made in my life were to go in and to get out when I did, because it was just,
it was time.
Yeah. It was just time. Like there was no
Transition.
one thing. It was just like, hey man, this feels right. To do this. And then that's when golf started coming in as like, okay, well, if I'm not going to do this, that I absolutely love and completely passionate about and can't believe I'm even thinking about not doing this. Well, what am I going to do instead? And then that really came down. There was a couple things I was looking at, but at the end of the day, it just came down to like, hey, what do I want to do that I feel is not going to feel like work? Yeah. That was really the deciding factor. And that was like, when I framed it that way in my mind, it was like, it was a no-brainer that it was golf. And Campbell University was at the top of my mind because
they got a PGM program.
Correct.
There. And, and at Methodist as well. I think you were looking at Methodist.
I briefly was looking at Methodist. Campbell was sticking. It was, again, just for whatever reason, felt right. And I think it was mainly just I was biased towards Campbell because we had played a charity tournament there, like, I don't know, a year or two.
Keith Hills.
At Keith Hills, yeah. And I go in there. I'd never played there, never heard of it. And I go in there and I was just like, the signs are all over. And then I was like, you can go to college for golf? I was like, that's pretty cool. I was like, I never even I was like, that's crazy. So that was in the back of my mind. So then I reached out to them and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And then
you were how old at that time?
Oh boy. So this was, I think I first reached out to them in 2016. So I was about 30, I guess. Yeah. So somewhere around there. But yeah, it just felt right. Like they were great. They're very accommodating and I'm like, hey, look, I'm going to be a mess. I got 2 kids. I got a job. I'm still in the military. Like, how can I start
because everybody else in
this?
that school is like 18 to 22, typical college age. Trying to get their PGM.
Yeah, and the schedule's all laid out for them, and I was just like, I was coming in there with undergrad. I took classes where I could on deployments and stuff, so I had a good amount of transfer credits. Mm-hmm. in the undergrad world. And so I was like, yeah, I mean, I don't need any of this. I need this. I need to get as fast as I can and get out of here. And they were great to do it. If they hadn't have been so accommodating, I wouldn't. It wouldn't have worked.
So you got your PGM, and one thing you have to do, having gone through this, we spoke before the podcast. I had gone through the accelerated Class A.
Yeah.
You have to pass the player's ability test that they call the PAT. And I remember the first time I took it was at the Hackler course at Coastal Carolina University. I passed it the first time I took it. I mean, I knew guys that were exceptionally good golfers that like it just gets between your ears. And you passed it the first time?
I did. Yeah, somehow.
I shot 79, 78. In fact, the last 4 holes, the guy who was my marker shot like 68, 70. And he's like, hey, Phil, you got to par the next 4 holes. You're on the number. And I'm like, gee, thanks. And but he kept me in it. He was like, hey, you parred this hole this morning, just par it again.
There you go.
And you shot what, 72, 80. So pretty good. And you passed it the first time. Yeah. So, you know, that I felt like I won the Masters after doing that. So I'm sure you felt similarly because you get that out of the way. Yeah.
And frankly, I have a pretty good PAT story. I mean, everybody tells you their PAT story, but mine, I kept the scorecard.
I did too. I read framed just like you did.
And I keep it in my office. Yeah. Because it's a good learning point. Because for me, you know, so when I made that decision, it was like, hey, this is what I want to do. I'm all in. I'm going to do it. One of the guys up there was like, hey, look, you know, I'd never played 36 holes in a day. Like I'd played very limited competition, you know, golf or competitive
totally
golf.
different than playing with your buddies. Every shot counts. There's no gimmies.
Yeah, totally different. So he's like, hey, look, what you should do is just take the PAT. Like there's one in like 2 months or whatever. Yeah. Just take it. I wasn't even in the program yet. He's like, just take it for the experience. Yeah. He's like, and who knows? Yeah. If you pass it, great. And I was like, okay. I think I was like I don't know, maybe like a 8 or 9 handicap. So I was decent, but I was definitely not the guy shooting under par every time. So I trained up for like 2 months, took some lessons, you know, and the day of the PAT, I wake up and I felt fine the night before, like totally ready to go, pumped up, right? Wake up the next day, sick as a dog, like 102 temp, like fever, flu-like symptoms, just miserable. And we lived in Rayford, so I had to get up early.
And what course was this at?
This was at Keith Hills.
At Keith Hills, okay.
Yep. So I had to get up early, and it was, I don't know, it was like an hour and 20 minutes, right? And all I'm sitting is thinking there, I'm thinking like, oh God, here we go. You know, I gotta cancel this thing, and I gotta reschedule. And then, but you got to get a note from a doctor and like send it in. And like, so I'm like, man, I'm not going to do that. I don't have time. I got to go to the base, like see a doctor, like that's a pain in the neck. Yeah. Like I'm not doing that. So I just go. I'm like, all right. So I'm like literally just miserable and, you know, Gatorade, you know, Tylenol, like just trying to, you know, and it's like 100 degrees out. Like it's miserable. God. It's in August.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh God, it's miserable. I hit 10 shots to warm up and just like curled up in the seat, like didn't care. The last thing I was worried about was like
passing a PAT.
Going to play golf. Yeah. Like I was just like, get me out of here. And I go out and shoot an even par on the first at 18.
Yeah.
And I remember Ken Jones was the program director at the time. And I handed my card in and I knew I had played well, but it didn't like, I was just like, oh God, we're halfway done. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he's like, oh dude, that's awesome. That's the low score of the day so far. Yeah. Like keep it going. And that like, I was like, I might have a chance to like pass this. And then I was like, okay, if I just do this, I started thinking about it.
Right.
And I started gaming it and I started like.
You get ahead of yourself. You got to stay in the moment.
That was like the biggest like mental game lesson. Really my first significant lesson in the mental game was like, and I tell people about it all the time. And I'm like, you have to somehow like trick yourself into not caring. Like, you know, David Orr, you know, he was there at Campbell. And I remember him saying one time, he's talking about, I think it was one of his mentors talked about like chasing a squirrel. It's like, you know, the harder you reach after it, the harder you go after it, the further away it gets you. And that was such a glaring, because the first thing I did was get up on that next tee of that next 18 and just slice one into the hazard.
Tense muscles make for bad shots.
But and I just, at the time, I had no idea. So I was chasing the squirrel because I was thinking about it. Whereas the first 18, I was just like, get me out of here.
Yeah.
And just letting my body do its thing.
Yeah.
And
Don't think.
It worked out great.
How did you find your way to CCNC?
So I was actually, it's very fortuitous, but I was actually, my last internship was at Keith Hills. So, or the last part of my internship time, because you need so many hours to get your PGA. And I was teaching out of Keith Hills. And so I would teach some guys there, and then there was a couple Army guys that were like, "Oh, you're a former Army guy." Like, da da da. One of them was a Patriot member at CCNC. So there's a Patriot program where they take a certain number and give them like a discounted rate and everything. It's a really great program. And so he went back. So I started working with him. He went back and started playing much better, thankfully. And then so a couple of the other members were like, "Hey man, what have you been doing?" Like, and he's like, "Oh, I've been seeing this guy up there." And then so they started coming up there to see me. Yeah. And then the one gentleman, he because he was like, "What are you going to do? What's your and your plan?" And I was like, "Well, I want to teach." And at the time, I was looking at a job up in New Jersey, and he was like, "Oh yeah, cool. We don't have a teaching program at CCNC, so I don't even think it dawned on him that I would be interested." Yeah. And so one day, probably in our last lesson, I think before I was going to leave, he was like, "Yeah, man, we're best of luck up there. We're really struggling to get assistants at CCNC, everybody left, it's just and I was like, "Well," I was like, "Hey, I'm leaving school. What
a great opportunity."
Yeah. You get your job. And he's like, "Well, I thought you just wanted to teach." I was like, "Yeah, but you don't just walk out of the PGM program as a nobody guy. Right. And just walk into a director of instruction position. It doesn't work like that." So he introduced me to Jeff. Yeah. Yeah. And get more, experience and all that stuff. So he introduced me to Jeff and Dotson, who's the director of golf up there.
Great guy.
Yeah. And, whereas most people would have laughed me out of the, I knew, again, my instinct drove me on that. Hey, I know that with my mindset and my willingness to learn and not fail, you know what I mean? I knew it was it's the picture started becoming they didn't have a full-time teacher. The demand was definitely there for it. And
right place, right time.
Yeah.
Timing's everything.
Yeah. That's kind of the long or short version of it. But it just, so I basically was hired as an assistant and was basically hey, the opportunity's there. And I just did what I could and tried to start meeting people and, kind of like we're talking about before, hey, I spent a lot of time up in the range, just hey, I can try that. And then it just and then COVID, hit. And then, so everybody was at the golf course all the time.
Best thing never happened to the game.
And so it all kind of just exploded.
So how long have you been at CCNC?
It'll be 5 years in January.
Wow. And we're just hearing about you. So 5 years, you become one of the best teaching golf teachers in America. If I told you that 5 years ago, what would you have said?
At the risk of sounding arrogant, I would have said, yeah, I could, again, because that's just my personality. It's I don't want to do something halfway. I just don't want to, I remember the Army recruiter was because I was in, he's like, "What do you like to do?" And, stuff. I'm like, "Well, I'm into music." And he's like, "Oh, we have an Army band." And I'm like, "Dude, if I go here, I'm going all the way." You know what I mean? I'm not joining the Army and going into the band. You know what I mean? I got other avenues for that.
You're going to be Eric Church.
So it's I knew, and I had some great mentors in Mike Adams, Terry Rolls was my, he and I met, we got to Matitaconk National in New Jersey at the same time. He was there as their new director of instruction, and I was there as their brand new, know-nothing intern. And it was just that's the guy. So I spent as much time with him as humanly possible. Asked him every annoying question that I can think of. And, you know, between those guys and, you know, what I got from David at Campbell, and then, you know, you just start meeting all these guys. So it's like, it's easy to say, you know, hey, you got this, you're on this list or whatever, but it's like, without those people, there's no, you know, there's no way I'd be on that list.
Sure.
They gave me the tools. I just had and that's why I always tell like people coming up is just like, don't, like, you're only limited, and it's so cliche, everybody says it, but you're only limited by what you're willing to do. You know, like I would up there, I didn't, you know, I was in the shop at that internship. So like, I couldn't just go watch them. Like I watched them on my own time. Like I would go down like after my shift, I wasn't getting paid, you know what I mean? But I knew that like, hey, this is a golden opportunity to get experience and learn from one of the best teachers in the country. And
you're at one of the best golf courses in the Carolinas. You know, Dogwood's rated number 3 in the state, Cardinals number 13. Great club, great GM. Nick Gray's a good friend, our assistant GM.
Yeah.
Jeff's awesome. I mean, it's just an awesome facility. What would describe your teaching style? So if I came to you, how am I going to learn from you?
Sure. Yeah, I think like the biggest thing that I learned, you know, from Terry and Mike and their methodology is that, and I think all good teachers, like any successful like big name teacher, teaches this way. They just word it differently, right? But like individuality, like you can't like look at a player, like the days of putting somebody's picture or video up against Ben Hogan or Tiger Woods or X
and try to make them
player,
that,
and be like, oh, well, you see when the club's here, his elbow's here, you need to get your elbow there. It's like, that to me, I think was like the light bulb that those guys gave me, was like, hey, there's not a universally like correct way to do this. There's, and especially with the technology we have now, I mean, we have markerless 3D, we have force plates, we have obviously launch monitors, we have, you know, all this stuff that's able to get us like objective data like this. Yeah. And what we don't see when we look at the best players in the world, we just don't see them all doing the same things. Like if you know what to look for, there's a lot of similarities, sure, right? And there's little kind of like groups of people that are similar. But man, I would argue that there's more differences than there are similarities.
Arnie says, swing your swing. You know, everybody's got physical limitations of some kind.
Yeah.
And that club, I always tell people, the club face does not know, you know, as long as you're meeting that ball squarely for the most part, the golf ball doesn't know who's hitting it. It just knows the club face is striking it at a certain launch angle, angle of approach and whatnot. So
so I would say that's typically the biggest thing we look for is like, hey, you know, I always give people the analogy of like when I was a firearms instructor, right? So we'd have a group of 60 guys, all experienced Green Berets, and I would say, look, I don't care if you pick the pistol up upside down and shoot it. I'd shoot it with my pinky, and I'd show them like I don't care if you shoot it like this, as long as you're being safe and you can meet the standard and you can put the you know. And so I kind of use a similar thing. I was like, I don't care if you flip the club upside down and hit it with the butt end. Like if you're, I don't think that's going to work. But like if you're
consistent,
if you're doing that and you're like striping the heck out of it, like, you know, and obviously there's certain like things where you're like, you know, but to me, I always tell people like if you do something and you hit it better consistently, like how is it wrong?
Yeah.
Like how is that wrong? Like, and I think as instructors, that's something we need to constantly be self-assessing is like, you know, because the industry is kind of known for like, well, I don't want to take a lesson because like I don't want to get worse.
Yeah.
It's kind of like backwards, right? Like our clients, our clientele shouldn't be nervous to come take lessons. Like we should be.
Well, you always hear it's like, well, you're going to get worse before you get better.
Yeah.
Because you got to change.
Sure.
You know, what you've done for years. So that's why I was like teaching juniors because they have no bad habits.
Yeah.
We all have like enormously bad habits. I've got tons. And it's like trying to overcome that is, you know, mental side of that. And then it's trying to execute and stay in the moment.
Well, yeah. And then it gets into the like, you know, well, this is the evil I know at least, right? So it's like people sometimes get hesitant to to go, take a lesson or change or accept the information.
It just
get
feels
at the lesson.
weird.
Yeah, because it feels weird, right? Or they don't immediately get the result, right? But I always tell people look, one of my favorite things to say is if you don't feel weird or if you don't feel different in a golf lesson, you shouldn't pay the person because you're not changing anything.
Yeah.
Right. If you expect to see the ball change and the performance change, you have to be willing to feel a little bit uncomfortable. Right. Now you can unpack that a lot of ways. Obviously if it hurts or, you're just like I've had lessons before in the past where I've just been yeah, I just can't do that. I know as an athlete, I know that hey, I can't do that. And that's what we try to stay away from. We say I like to say it's okay. You're going to feel different. You're going to feel weird. You should, if you want this to change, but it's if you, what we try to stay away from is giving somebody something where they're just you're telling them that it's correct, but they know they just can't do it. And I hear that all the time. Man, I've been working on bringing it outside and closing the face, or whatever, you know. And they're just God, I just can't do it. And then you kind of look at them biomechanically and you have them do some assessments and just again, see what their body wants to do and what it's capable of doing. And then 99 times out of 100, the player that says that, you're well, just don't do that. Do it this way. Take it back a little more open.
Easier said than done, right?
Yeah, but then they did not. I mean, more often than not, they do it and they're oh my God.
Yeah.
You just give them.
The light bulb goes off.
Yeah, you give them permission.
Yeah.
Give them permission to just do what they want to do naturally.
Let me ask you this. When you give them drills, do they come back the next day? Oh, I didn't have time to do those drills.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. It gets you're not going to get better unless you do the drills. And
well, it's definitely a two-way street. And I always tell people hey, because another question I get a lot is well, how long is this going to take? You know what I mean? And it's that's up to you.
Right.
I'm giving you the tools. The responsibility lies on the student.
That's true.
I'd say that to the Campbell kids all the time. You're we're not here. You're not here to be spoon fed. You're getting the tools. You have to apply yourself and do it. And it really depends on how much time that player has, how what their physical abilities are and skill level. And usually if you put that, mash that equation up, you get a better answer than just 2 weeks, or a month or whatever. So it's really individualistic. It's a cop out in a way, but it's everybody's so different. We have so many different pieces. It's to sit there and try to have everybody do the same thing is just kind of crazy. Do
you get the chance to play? Do you get to go out and play and try your game?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it depends. My goal is 50 rounds a year.
Okay,
that's my goal. I haven't come close to it yet.
What's your best score at Cardinal and Dogwood?
Oh boy, I'm a Cardinal guy. I for whatever reason Cardinal sets up better. So my scoring average on Cardinal is probably close, 2.5 strokes lower, to be honest with you. But probably right around even from the tips, probably right around even par, 72, 73, which for out there for me is really good. I'm really happy with that.
Yeah.
I try to play with the members. This time of year is actually the best
Have
time.
You played with Eric Kuster?
I have not.
He's got a good swing. Eric, I'm not just saying that. Eric's got a good swing.
Well, I actually saw him. I saw him the other day, and he's oh, you gotta come out, check out number 10. And I was man, I'd love to. He's but this time of year is really the first time of year where you can just all right, let me, because you're constantly thinking about everybody else's swings and trying to help them. But
two more questions. What's the best lesson you ever got?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I would be remiss if I didn't say it was from Terry at Matitaconk, but I've had some good ones. But Terry Rolls was the first time, kind of I just explained, that was the first time where what he was saying I should do just felt completely that feels okay, right? Before that, it was always oh, I can do this athletically, and I think that's why I bought into the methodology the way I did, and because it's just like it worked for me. Like it was like, God, that makes so much sense. And the more I learned about it, I'm like this is it. Like this makes a lot of sense. And I'm definitely not dogmatic about it. I don't think anybody can afford to be dogmatic about this stuff because it's like it's constantly changing. And again, the individual is constantly changing. But that was probably the first time where I've felt like this. I feel like I could do this like over and over and over again and not feel like I have to like try to, I guess, if that makes sense.
And as we do this podcast and we post it in the wintertime, obviously we don't get to play as much golf. There's not as much daylight. What would be like your best advice in the off season to kind of just, tweak some things, or just, what would you say would be your best advice to kind of work on during the wintertime to prepare for the spring season? We start playing more golf.
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest with you, I'm trying so hard to reverse that mentality, because from an instruction standpoint, the winter is like the best time. Like you can strip the bolts, strip it down a little bit. Good point. And because you're not playing as much, there's not as many tournaments and events and whatever. But we kind of look at it the other way. We say, it's the off season.
Right. Like, you make a great point. This is the time to really work on
this
stuff.
Is the time to, if you're struggling, don't accept the Band-Aid, like figure out like what the issue is. Right. So that's what we, always look for, is like, what's the root cause? Somebody may be having this issue. Hey, I'm flipping my hands at impact, or I'm coming over the tower, whatever it is. 9 times out of 10, that, like, it's too easy. It's too one-dimensional to just say, oh, well, don't do that. Like, try to come from more from the inside, or like try to hold we get more lag and, whatever. But it's like, really what we see is like that, where you are in that moment is almost directly dependent on where you were slightly before that. And that's dependent on where you were slightly before that. And if you go all the way back and find it's like a virus and a symptom, like the symptom, if you continue to treat the symptom, the virus is still going to be there. Like you may clear up and feel better for a little bit, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, that virus is going to continue to like win. And so we always try to look for like root causes. Like I like to find like, hey, you're doing this because, look at back here, in the backswing, you were whatever, too outside, too inside, too open, too closed, like sway, too much pelvis, whatever it is. And once you're able to, look at somebody's swing and say, like 3-dimensionally, and say like, that's happening because this. So that player has to be in that position. There's no other way. There's no other way to do it, right? It's your brain trying to help you get the club to the ball based on what you've given it. So to answer your question, one of the best things to do is, without hitting balls, is just really slow, deliberate repetition, inside, eyes closed is a great way to do it. Focus, like I always say, like the ball's not going to obey you until the club does, and the club's not going to do what you want until your body moves correctly. So changing your body and how your body moves and how you feel and how you perceive the swing is everything. And if you can't do that, you can't possibly like look to the ball to be different, because that's the last thing that's going to change. So I always encourage people like, hey, if you're coming off an injury, it's cold, it's rainy, it's like whatever, just take a couple things that you're working on with your coach, or just, whatever, and just go through very, very deliberately, like dry moves, like without hitting, with your eyes closed. And, there's a lot of research out there that shows the slower you do I think they use this in rehabilitation for guys who get seriously injured in combat zones and stuff. The slower, if you do like a movement, like for rehabilitation, I meant like incredibly slow, deliberate movements, it has like the effect of having like several times that in your brain, like cognitively. And that's really fascinating. So like closing your eyes and going very like stupid slow, like try taking a golf swing in like 2.5 minutes. Like try to take 2.5 minutes to swing a club, or 3 minutes or something like that. It's crazy.
Much like Tai Chi almost.
Yeah, I don't know much about Tai Chi, but yeah.
There's those movements,
Maybe-
those slow movements, and
Yeah.
interesting stuff. I mean,
yeah.
And getting to the root cause is the big deal, because you build a house, you got to have a foundation. Without the
100%.
foundation, the grip. What was like when I used to teach and didn't know we're close to you, it was all about the grip. Grip's the 1st thing. It's the only thing that touches the club. So without a good grip, that's foundation.
Yep.
You got to be able to hold the club a certain way.
100%.
Yeah.
And we like to say there's only 2 places you can affect change: hands on the club and feet on the ground.
Yeah.
Every force that's generated, every change to the golf club and hence the golf ball has to go through one, if not both of those gates. So that's a great place to start, is
Absolutely.
right there.
CCC private club, but how can we take a lesson with Joe Steadman?
So if you're a friend of a guest or a guest of a member, that's an easy way. I can take non-members. I just have to be, I just have to manage it and make sure that the membership is the first priority. But
Can we connect with you online somewhere? Or
absolutely, yeah. My email is jsteadman at steadman at ccofnc.com. And again, my schedule usually kind of quiets down a little bit in the wintertime. And again, I'm hoping I can, because I'm hoping to flip that a little bit. But yeah, if you shoot me an email, we can see if we can work out something and go from there.
Well, Joe, you have a great story. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for
being
having me
named-
on.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Being named one of the Golf Digest best golf teachers in America for 2025-26. Best of luck at CCNC. Thank you for being part of this great community, the home of American golf. Pinehurst is a great place, and you make it even better.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very, very fortunate to be here. And like I said, if you're ever in the area, come by.
I will.
We'll peg it.
We certainly will. Joe Steadman, thank you for joining us in Paradise in the Pines. If you want to learn more about tourism in Moore County, go to our website, homeofgolf.com. And if you want to watch some of our videos, including this podcast, go to our YouTube channel, which is Home of American Golf. Tell your friends about Paradise in the Pines, this podcast. Tell them to download it. Go to Spotify, Anchor, wherever you get your podcast. Download it and check it out. See you next time on Paradise in the Pines.